About 5 months ago, I got all of the achievements in Wolfenstein Youngblood. I finally unlocked Gearhead on December 1st, 2024. The final achievement for Wolfenstein Youngblood. And I'm free. I escaped the Nazi regime. I don't know the state that Paris was left in. Since that was the most recent game in the Wolfenstein series, I thought it would be fun to get all of the achievements in each Wolfenstein game in reverse order of release date, starting from Youngblood and ending at the OG Wolfenstein 3D. Welcome back to Socks and Sandals, and today we will be tackling Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus. Wolfenstein 2 doesn't only have the distinction of being the hardest game in the series, but it's also the only game with DLC. So along with getting all of the achievements for the base game, we will also earn all of the achievements for the 3 DLC campaigns. As I played Wolfenstein 2 when it initially came out, I started this achievement hunt horse with a majority of the achievements. The only achievements I was missing for the base game were Sidetracked, Taste of Your Own Medicine, They Did Not See That Coming, I'm Machine Enough, Bring 'Em On, Do or Die, Call Me Terror Billy, I Am Death Incarnate, the infamous Mein Leben, Max All Perks, and Hard Headed. 5 of these 11 achievements will be earned for completing the game on I Am Death Incarnate. To start this achievement hunt off, I loaded up my previous near 100% save file and completed the last 3 side missions I was missing. This achievement was a little worrying because of the one side mission to collect all of Max's toys. Reportedly, if you collect all of his toys before actually starting the side mission for doing so, you can lock yourself out of the achievement and will have to do it on a separate playthrough. Thankfully, however, even though I couldn't quite remember if I failed starting the side mission, when I completed my last side mission, the sidetrack achievement unlocked. Next up, I traveled to the Riverside area to fight a Zersterer. After shooting off one of his arms, I picked up the Ubergewehr and killed him with it, unlocking the Taste of Your Own Medicine achievement. You can also unlock this at the end of the game with the return to Ausmercer, since the final battle has you fight 2 at the same time. The next achievement I unlocked was unfortunately not captured. While playing through on I Am Death Incarnate, I earned They Did Not See That Coming during the first stealth section on the Ausmercer. Hello, Editor Cody here. So I realized once I started editing this video that only 4 of the achievements earned were for completing the game on Death Incarnate. The I Am Machine Enough was actually an achievement earned for completing the Panzerhund ride without killing any enemies. The way to get around the Panzerhund ride without killing anyone is to basically just get off of the Panzerhund at the start of the level, go through, kill all of the enemies. You don't actually have to kill everyone in this starting area. Once you reach a certain point, the enemies in the starting area will just despawn. The next area in the factory is the one you really have to worry about. You just go through here, kill a majority of the enemies while still off of the Panzerhund. And then once you get into the sewer, it's probably best to kill, I think, like the first 3 enemies, and then once you actually get to the end where the commander is, once you get into that pipe, the achievement pops, unlocking our I Am Machine Enough. I don't know why, I just completely forgot that this achievement was even in the game. I've been playing a lot of Wolfenstein 2, so it was so long ago now that that achievement was kind of inconsequential, but there you go. Speaking of my Death Incarnate playthrough, while I was playing, I followed a guide just to better prepare myself for Mein Leben. The worrisome sections being Courthouse, Venus, and the return to the Ausmercer. Now, these were the sections I was initially worried about. However, once actually playing on Death Incarnate, I learned the pain of the random behavior of the enemy AI, making levels like your first visit to Manhattan, Roswell, the return to Manhattan, and New Orleans extremely stressful and frustrating. The only really notable thing to mention from my Death Incarnate playthrough is that the method I used to complete the final boss battle was completely different from the method I used for Mein Leben. Instead of outright fighting both Zersterers, I just booked it to the left side of the door, waited for the first one to come out, moved into the room he came from while blasting the normal soldiers with the shotguns. After killing those guys, I tossed an electromagnetic grenade at the second Zersterer, and once the grenade goes off, I battle walkered up the ladder, duck into the vent, and I get away scot-free. This is quite a risky maneuver. There is a number of things that could go wrong here. You can be killed by the door as the Zersterer bursts out of it. The normal soldiers can kill you. Your grenade may not stun the Zersterer, and he'll nuke you. You can even be killed by your own grenade, and when you were literally at the end of the game, it just wasn't worth the risk. But needless to say, once we complete this encounter, all that's left is to kill Frau Engel, and we unlock 5 achievements at once for completing the game on I Am Death Incarnate. And thus we are just left with 3 achievements for base game New Colossus. Where most achievement/trophy hunters would save the Mein Leben achievement for last, I deemed it necessary to do next. Not only because I just finished my Death Incarnate playthrough, but if I couldn't get the Mein Leben achievement, then there was no reason to worry about the other 2. So let's just get this freak show on the road. To no one's surprise, my first few runs were embarrassingly disappointing. A lot of the early attempts, my run would end upon entering Manhattan. I got stuck here so often that I decided to basically replay the entire game again, learning new techniques. I don't intend to go over each of my attempts because if I did, this video would be just as long as my successful Mein Leben run. But one of my early attempts, at which I made it to the Roswell train, I missed the jump and fell to my death. Several attempts later, in the New Orleans night section, I was spotted by enemies I had never been spotted by before, of course triggering an alarm. I decided to try and run for the exit, and in hindsight, I should have at least brought out the shotguns and took out the enemies standing in my way. But what can you do? And finally, once making it to the second to last encounter on the return to the Ausmercer, I felt nervous about the method I had practiced for this section. So in attempting a new method, I got spooked by a laser hund, which in turn caused me to run directly off the map. This was absolutely devastating. But it reinforced a lesson I honestly should have adhered to in this situation. Do what you know best. While my previous method was somewhat risky, I knew what to expect, so I should have just proceeded with what I practiced. I was actually confident that if I had made it past this section, I could have completed Mein Leben. But who could say? So we then come to my successful run. I can't say it was the cleanest, but I made it past my previous personal best to the final boss battle of the game. I believe I had a close call here, but otherwise completed this encounter with only a slightly higher heart rate. Which then brings us to the Frau Engel scene, which is entirely possible to die during. So we can't even experience the catharsis of killing this vile woman, we still have to be worried. But after picking up the 2 health pickups in this area and running straight for Engel, we succeed in completing Mein Leben.
fastball, too. You a mobile wolf now. These are our words.
With that, we've just 2 achievements left, so next I load back into my near 100% save file and start grinding out perks. A lot of them weren't too bad. I think the only one that was a bit frustrating was the enemy grenade kills. But with completing the Constrictor Harness takedowns, I unlock Max All Perks. Quite the original name. Which comes to probably the most mind-numbing achievement of the game, Hard-Headed. With Hard-Headed, we are required to collect 1,000 helmets. With this account being my initial save, I assumed I probably had at least 300 helmets collected. So I loaded into the Manhattan Penthouse level and did a simple loop around the starting area after killing all but one enemy via headshots. As I ran around, the remaining enemy dealt damage to me, allowing me to pick up helmets to replenish my armor. I was able to pick up about 11 helmets each loop, and after I picked up all of the helmets available, I jumped out the window to reload a previous save to do it all again. After about an hour and 660 helmets collected, if my count was right, the final achievement of Wolfenstein II popped. And that's base Wolfenstein 2 completed, so we can now begin the DLC. Each DLC adds 10 achievements to the game, 3 for completing each of the 3 chapters, 1 for collecting all gold, 1 for reading all readables, 1 for beating the DLCs on Death Incarnate, 3 for completing the 3 challenge levels on Death Incarnate, and of course, 1 for beating the DLCs on Mein Leben. Fortunately, however, in order to obtain each of the Mein Leben achievements for the DLC packs, you only need to complete the 3rd chapter on Mein Leben. Before I started this achievement hunt tours, I originally had the idea to play all 3 chapters on Mein Leben. My thought was, if I can complete all of the new Colossus on Mein Leben, I can complete each DLC's 3 chapters on Mein Leben. That was, of course, before actually completing Mein Leben. And, of course, only after completing all of the DLCs, I can say this was a stress I did not want to instill on myself. The Death Incarnate achievement can also be gained in the same manner, but to make up for cheesing the Mein Leben achievement, I opted to play each chapter on Death Incarnate. The first DLC is The Adventures of Gunslinger Joe, a tale about a football player enslaved by the Nazis. He's set on a quest for vengeance to kill the Nazi sympathizer that imprisoned him and his father, and after escaping the prison, we unlock First Down. Next, we proceed through a small Chicago suburb to find our father, and after finding him, we unlock Down at the Half. It may seem that I'm kind of running through the stories of these DLCs, I just want to say that now, but there really isn't much story to be had. As the same goes for Wolfenstein II base game, the stories in these are inconsequential. So, just wanted to say that it's really just to preface the achievement. Continuing on, however, after reuniting with our father, we chase Uber Commander Metza all the way to Venus. During the final chapter, I unlock Read the Defense for finding all of the readables in Gunslinger Joe. And then Signing Bonus for finding all of the gold. I opted to follow a guide during this initial playthrough to minimize the number of playthroughs I'd have to do. Shortly after that, we survive Metz's assault and throw him out a window, unlocking both Touchdown and First Team Soldier. Next up, I loaded back into the third chapter and did a couple practice runs in preparation for Mein Leben. The vast majority of this chapter isn't too difficult, barring the train depot section, which I would have liked to complete stealthy, but the enemy AI in these DLC chapters are particularly busted. Doing this section while in stealth is ideal to save on time, but hiding in this corner is a nice spot to camp if the alarm is triggered. The next area that gave me quite a bit more trouble is the final encounter. For the longest time, I could not consistently survive this encounter. After about 5 failed Mein Leben attempts, I genuinely did not think I could earn the Mein Leben achievement for this DLC. Until I discovered a video guide in which, instead of just outright triggering the alarms in this area, you can throw grenades in specific locations and kill the commanders and not trigger the alarm, thus preventing super soldiers from spawning and drastically reducing the difficulty of this encounter. So, after running around and killing the remaining enemies, we're only left with the Citadel. Once you take out his right arm, he's basically harmless. You know, as long as you don't stand right next to him, you won't be a fried done turkey. Once he's destroyed, that's Gunslinger Joe's Mein Leben complete. All that's left for this DLC are the challenge maps. The first one ain't anything, and you could basically crouch walk straight to the exit. But upon completing the challenge map, we unlock Laboratory Expert. The next map, however, was not nearly as simple. The Nightmare Challenge is probably one of the more difficult things to complete in the entirety of Wolfenstein II. The Nightmare sends progressively more difficult waves of enemies at you, and with Death Incarnate compiled with a limited amount of ammo, this was uber difficult. I think I spent at least 2 hours attempting this. I even attempted to camp behind a box on the map, which was said to be a decent cheese method, but I did significantly worse using that method. Eventually, I did clutch up and complete the Nightmare, earning Nightmare Expert. The final challenge for this DLC is just the final encounter of the third chapter. I played the encounter like I did for the Mein Leben run, and after a few attempts, completed the challenge. Unlocking, I guess you pronounce this, Venetian Expert? Apparently, you can also just run straight to the door. As long as the Citadel doesn't kill you, you can just exit the challenge. But that's one DLC down, 2 to go. Agent Silent Death's campaign is probably the best of the DLC campaigns, as it is mostly done in stealth. The DLC begins with our titular hero receiving dossiers on the 3 men that betrayed, imprisoned, and subsequently executed her husband. So she sets out to avenge her Frank, I think that's his name. Again, we're starting each chapter on Death Incarnate, and the first chapter is by far the quickest and easiest. That being said, all of the chapters for Silent Death are comparatively shorter than the other 2 DLCs, but nevertheless, after we assassinate our first target, we unlock Back in the Field.
And so another Nazi bellend had been sent to hell. Good riddance, Uber Commander.
The next chapter sees Agent Silent Death in Hollywood on a film backlot to assassinate the actor that betrayed Frank. Once we've assassinated him, we unlock Cut, Cut, Cut.
I'd planned on spending the end of my days in Brazil. I was at the point where it seemed my years of strife were finally over. Jack was fading away into the distant past.
And finally, we travel to the moon to assassinate General Dunkel, the man that ordered the execution of Silent Death's husband. The beginning of this chapter isn't so bad. You can skip a majority of the enemies. The challenging part, however, is after you destroy life support and are put on a time clock to assassinate the general. After life support is destroyed, the AI that spawn in are some of the screwiest and most random I've seen in any game, which will really cause us issues on Mein Leben. But once we take out Dunkel, we unlock Dunked and Expert Spy for completing Silent Death on Death Incarnate.
As I stood over Jack's bane, a sense of emptiness overcame me.
The 3 challenges for Silent Death are thankfully some of the easiest to do and can be completed relatively painless. The first being the only one requiring limited skills, since you have to kill all enemies to complete it. But since you can remain in stealth, it's still quite simple. Once it's complete, we unlock Sacramento Medalist, and move on to the Hollywood challenge, which can be completed by taking out 3 enemies and running to the exit, so I won't complain.
You have a drinking problem, bartender in Sao Paulo once said. Bloody Nazis are marching on your streets and you're telling me?
We unlock Hollywood Medalist. Finally, utilizing the method I'd practiced for Mein Leben, I completed the final challenge with only a slight hiccup when I got lost. But once we finish the challenge, we unlock Lunar Medalist. For this DLC, I decided to do an initial playthrough on Death Incarnate and then a second playthrough on Can I Play Daddy to get the collectibles. After picking up all the readables in gold, we unlock Investigation Complete and California Gold.
That's right. Maybe I was finally in over my head. Maybe Jack would never be avenged. Well, At least I'd die trying.
Lastly, we have the Mein Leben run. This chapter really didn't adhere to the same rules. Since the AI were so random, it really didn't matter practicing the section once life support was destroyed. My first attempt was extremely disappointing since I was literally 1 second away from completing it before succumbing to a lack of oxygen. Thankfully, this chapter is definitely the quickest to redo on Mein Leben. It was only slightly irritating having to try another 4 times. However, by getting incredibly lucky and not being mauled by the dog, we kill Dunkel and unlock Ultimate Spy, completing the Diaries of Agent Silent Death.
Sparkling in the void.
The Deeds of Captain Wilkins is the longest and by far the most boring of the 3 DLC, which is credence enough for me to not even bother discussing the story of the 3 chapters. After completing the first chapter, we unlock Homecoming.
Heard of the sun gun?
I decided to change up tactics again and complete each challenge map after completing its respective chapter. The first challenge was slightly difficult, but since we had the Battle Walker, we can get on top of this support beam and take out a majority of the enemies with relative ease. After completing the first challenge, we unlock Alaskan Expert.
I was gonna tag him.
Next, after completing the second chapter, we unlock Ticket Punched.
I'm your daughter, you stupid son of a bitch.
My daughter?
The challenge for this chapter is a quick stealth section, which ends with us running past 2 super soldiers. Again, only a slight mishap when I got lost again. We unlock Kodiak Expert once the challenge is complete. Then the final chapter is the quickest and easiest, which is certainly welcomed. Once it's completed, we unlock Hero's Journey and Army Vet. Lastly, we have certainly the most difficult challenge of the DLC. This challenge is the final encounter of the Captain Wilkins campaign, only now we don't have the luxury of having the drop on the enemies. You basically want to take out all of the enemies in the immediate vicinity as quickly and stealthily as possible. I found that moving to the left and taking out the soldier and the dog was more viable. Too many times did the dog just immediately rush me and ruin my day once I went loud. Once I took out the dog, I doubled back, switched to dual shock hammers, threw 2 grenades into the room with 1 super soldier, and unloaded on the other. After that, I ran to the supply closet at the opposite end of the area and camped, taking out the enemies as they rushed me. I ran between the 2 rooms as enemies threw grenades. Once I survived the onslaught and killed the last straggler, I completed the hardest challenge in Wolfenstein II. Captain Wilkins' Mein Leben run is thankfully really easy. So easy, in fact, I didn't even bother doing any practice runs. After completing it, we unlocked Super Soldier, and that's just 2 achievements for the entirety of the new Colossus. So I did a quick run through of the Captain Wilkins DLC once more, picking up all of the collectibles and unlocking intel acquired and stipend gained. And that's Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus, fully completed. Was it worth the effort, frustration, and worry? No. In short, it was not. I honestly believe that the developers themselves never actually beat the game on Mein Leben, because Wolfenstein 2 is just not designed well enough to operate properly within a permadeath mode. In fact, the game does not even know how to process the feat of completing Mein Leben, as the end screen is just blank, except the options at the bottom asking you to select a save file that does not exist. All the while, the final credits and cutscene play out in the background. The DLCs were fine enough, at least Silent Death and Gunslinger Joe were anyways. Forgetting Mein Leben and the DLC, the game itself just was not fun to play. The gunplay was okay, and the stealth at least works better than Youngblood, but the story is nearly non-existent, and the in-game content consists of mostly busy work. This all being said, however, I am extremely proud to have this full completion. I still think the final countdown in LEGO Rock Band is the hardest achievement I've ever earned, but Mein Leben is a close second. Before this, the only foray into permadeath I had was Contagion mode in Callisto Protocol, which I utilized the cloud save cheat to exploit, and partially Returnal, not really because it's a roguelike, so dying is part of the game. But to close out, if you really want to go for the full completion of New Colossus, it's 100% doable. Just be conscious you will be frustrated. A lot of the time, you will be frustrated. But if you beat your head against a wall long enough, eventually you'll get through. However, if that frustration is something you understandably don't want to put yourself through, then it's not worth it. But if you like the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like. I have plenty of other achievement hunting videos on the channel and would love if y'all check them out. If there are any games you'd like to see me earn all of the achievements in, leave them in the comments down below. But other than that, check back next time for whatever I do. Bye-bye.